Hello, my dear children. Hope you all are enjoying at home and must be taking care of your studies also. This is a module where we are going to discuss social science, civics, class 10 for board examination. So, coming to the very first module, once again, I welcome you all and suggest you to focus on what you are going to study. The first chapter is power sharing. We are going to discuss the meaning of power sharing. How this concept developed. Dear children, power sharing is the idea that emerged in opposition to the notion of undivided political power. We have to focus here on 2-3 words. Power sharing is an idea. This is, I think, very clear to you. Which emerged in opposition to the notion of undivided political power. This undivided political power means what? During ancient and medieval periods, the rulers, the kings, the badshahs, the sultans, they did not want to share power. Legislature, executive, judiciary, all 3 organs of powers were concentrated in one hand. And that one hand was one person, and that one person was the king, the badshah, the sultan. Whatever name you want to give, you give. Historians have given different names for different periods, right? As per the culture and tradition of that time, right? During ancient times, there were Rajas, Rajan, Maharaja, Maharaja Dhiraj. These words, Samrat, these words were very popular. In medieval times, during the Sultanate period, Sultan term was very popular. During the Mughal period, Badshah term was very popular. So different periods and different names for the rulers, right? Okay, so these rulers did not want to share power, right? This is the old notion of political power. This is the old notion of political power. You see here, political power, and that power was undivided. Undivided means what? Concentrated in one hand or few hands. Few hands means the king and his chief advisor, or a very small group of ministers who were actually practically were having no say in decision making. Final decision maker was the king, right? When people started opposing these things, then democracy emerged. And democracy, it's an English word, right? You know that, you have studied that in class 9. And democracy, that English word, has emerged as a combination of 2 Greek words. One is demos, the other one is kratia. Demos means people, kratia means government. So democracy means what? People's government. It's a government in which every individual has equal share, right? Equal share means what here? One person, one vote, one value. People are the source of power. People are not subject. People are citizen, right? When this concept of democracy started developing and spreading in different parts of the world, right, the concept of power sharing was also spreading. Spread of democracy, popularity of democracy means popularity of sense of power sharing, concept of power sharing. But remember, after 1945, the end of the Second World War, the contemporary period starts in world history. And after the Second World War, you can say after 1945, most of the Asian and African countries got independence. And most of them followed democratic system of government. So democracy became the most popular form of power sharing, or you can say the most popular form of government in the world, right? And this you have seen on a map in class 9, first chapter, though the chapter has now been omitted from the syllabus. But I suggest you to once see the map at least. Okay, so after 1945, the number of democratic countries increased suddenly. Why? Because of power sharing. Because of what? Power sharing, right? Because power in democracy is shared among different organs of the government. Legislature for making laws, executive for implementing laws, judiciary for deciding the disputes, and all three governments organs check one another, right? Horizontally also power is shared, vertically also power is shared. Different communities, among different communities also power is shared, right? You can see examples in India, reservation of seats, right? And even political parties have shared power, that is alliances and coalition governments. You know about these things, and we will be discussing all these things in this chapter. So my dear children, the concept of power sharing is in a way the concept of democracy, right? And remember, democracy turns the subjects into citizens, and citizens are the source of power. So power sharing is must in democracy. So my dear children, we have already studied about the concept of power sharing and how power sharing is important in modern democracies. If we can say the concept of power sharing developed with the development of the concept of democracy, or you can say with the development of the sense of democracy, the concept of power sharing also developed, right? Now we are going to discuss two stories, and the two stories are the story of Belgium and the story of Sri Lanka. First we are going to take the story of Belgium, right? If you see on this board, it is the ethnic composition of Belgium, right? Ethnic stands for what? Ethnic means people of different social divisions, they believed in shared culture. They may not be of the same nationality, they may not be of the same religion, but they must share culture. This is called ethnicity. As we can see on this map, Belgium is surrounded by the Netherlands in the north, Germany in the east, Luxembourg in southeast, France in the southwest, and North Sea in the northwest, right? Now, if you see this map, this is one part, this is the second part, and this is the third part. This area, the northern part of Belgium, is famous as Flemish region, and the Dutch people are in majority in this region, right? This is Wallonian region, and in this region French speaking people are in majority, right? This is the area in the central eastern boundary of Belgium, and in this small region German speaking people reside. So this is the whole ethnic composition of Belgium, right? We describe this in another manner also. In the northern part of Belgium, that is called the Flemish region, the Dutch people reside and they contribute 59% population to the population of Belgium, right? This is the Wallonian region in the southern side of Belgium, and this region is inhabited by French speaking people, and the French speaking people contribute 40% of the population of entire Belgium. The Germans here in the central eastern part on the boundary, they constitute or contribute only 1% of the population to the total population of Belgium, right? So if we see the whole nation, the Dutch speaking people with 59% share in population are in majority. The French people with 40% contribution or share in population at national level are in minority. Germans 1%, of course they are in minority, right? But the strange thing is yet to come, and that strange thing is the capital city Brussels, right? In Brussels, as you can see here, we have written something. In Brussels, the capital city, the French speaking population is 80%, right? The Dutch speaking population is only 20% of the total population of Brussels. So the situation is just opposite to the national population composition, right? Or to the ethnic composition of Belgium at national level. Now, this is the strange case. What is the strange case? The strange case is at national level, the Dutch people are in majority, the French people are in minority. But in the capital city of Brussels, the French people are in majority and the Dutch people are in minority. Remember, this entire Belgium was ruled by the Netherlands, right? Belgium got independence from the Netherlands in 1830 on 4th October. But Netherlands recognized the independence of Belgium on 19 April 1839. Got? Belgium is famous for three things. Number one, Belgium is famous for its medieval towns. Very beautiful medieval towns are there in Belgium. This is number one. Number two, Belgium is the headquarter of the NATO, NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And above all, recently when the European Union was formed, the capital city of Brussels was chosen as the headquarter of the European Union. So, Belgium is famous for how many things? Three things. The medieval towns, number one. Number two, the headquarter of NATO. And number three, the headquarter of the European Union. Right? My dear children, this is very important to note that Belgium's ethnic composition had created a big problem, but the people of Belgium later on realized that quarrel, fight, conflict, civil war has no end, and these things will continue. So they thought something. They amended their constitution. They amended their constitution 4 times. These 4 amendments were made between 1970 to 1993. Means how many years total? 1970 to 1993, 23 years and 4 amendments. By these 4 amendments, the people of Belgium decided to do only one thing. Means these 4 amendments had only one objective, and that single objective was to make the 3 communities. Which 3 communities? The Dutch, the French and the German. To make these 3 communities live together in one country. In other words, we can say these 4 amendments had a single objective of keeping this country Belgium united. To stop partition of Belgium, the 3 communities decided to amend their constitution 4 times, and the result was the Belgian model of power sharing. Then what is the Belgian model of power sharing? Under these 4 amendments, 4 major provisions were made. The first major provision was that at national level government, the French speaking ministers and the Dutch speaking ministers will be equal. I mean, number of ministers speaking Dutch language and number of ministers speaking French language will remain equal. This is point number 1. Point number 2, they decided that the number of Dutch speaking ministers and the number of French speaking ministers will again remain equal in the government of the capital city, Brussels. So 2 points. First, at national level government, the number of Dutch and French speaking ministers will be equal. In the capital city, Brussels government, the number of Dutch and French ministers will be equal. What do these 2 points describe? These 2 points describe that at national level, the Dutch got ready to share power with the French. And at capital city level, the French got ready to share power with the Dutch. So 2 points. Point number 3. Entire country was divided into different states or provinces, right? Now, the state governments were given different powers than the powers of the national government or the government of Belgium, right? Then, the state governments in Belgium were not made subordinate to the national government. And when this provision is there in any country, the country becomes federal in nature. So, Belgium became federal in nature by making the 3rd provision of the 4 amendments, and the provision was the state governments will not be subordinate to the national government. Clear? Clear-cut division of power between the national government and the state governments. Right? So 3 points we have discussed. Now the 4th point. As we have seen, in the entire Belgium, 3 communities were there. The Dutch, the French and the German. Right? It was difficult for the Dutch to develop culture, language and education of the remaining 2 communities. Same way, it was difficult for the French to develop culture, language and education of the other 2 communities. Like the same way, it was difficult for the Germans also. So, it was decided to make a 4th kind of arrangement in Belgium, and that was community government. German community government, French community government, Dutch community government, and the only objective of the 3 community governments was to develop 3 things: language, culture and education of own. Means Germans will be looking after Germans, Dutch will be looking after Dutch, and French will be looking after the French. Right? We can say that these four arrangements, especially the fourth arrangement of community government, was very complicated. We can say like that. But remember, this provision saved people of Belgium from civil war. I repeat, this provision of community government saved the people of Belgium from what? Civil war. This is very important thing. Number two, this provision only made the three communities to develop on their own independently and freely and in a very smooth way. The third thing, as Brussels had set a very good example of power sharing, Belgium had set a very good example of power sharing. When the European Union was formed, they decided to set or to choose or to select Brussels as their headquarters. This was the result of what you know? This was the result of power sharing. Yes, because power sharing promotes democratic values. And democratic values means what? Share and care. You share with others and you have the sense of care for others. This is power sharing, and this is the very important value of any democratic country. So, my dear children, we have discussed about the story of Belgium, and with the help of that story, we have learned the importance of power sharing in democracy. Right? Now we are going to study the second story, and that story is related to Sri Lanka. Right? Let us see. This is the map of Sri Lanka. Right? If you see the map very clearly, and you see here, it's given the surrounding of Sri Lanka. Right? First you pay attention here. Sri Lanka, in the northern side it is Bay of Bengal here. In the eastern side also Bay of Bengal to large extent. In the southern side it's the Indian Ocean, and in the northwestern side it's Arabian Sea. It's like that. Okay? Then if you see, this is the Park Strait and this is the Gulf of Mannar. The Park Strait is the strait that separates Sri Lanka from our country, India. Right? Sri Lanka was under the British, like we were under the British. We got independence on 15 August 1947, and the Sri Lankans, they got independence on 4th February 1948. Right? So this is a very brief information about Sri Lanka. Right? The capital city of Sri Lanka is called Ceylon in old times, but now it's Colombo. Right? The legislature capital of Sri Lanka at present is Sri Jayawardhanepura Kotti. It's not mentioned here, but remember that it's Sri Jayawardhanepura Kotti. Right? Now, coming to the ethnic composition of Sri Lanka. Right? You pay attention here. And on the map also. Right? This area I'm talking about, the red dots. This area is the area where the Sinhalas are in majority. Right? And this area, the people, the Sinhalas, right, they are in majority and they are the dominant group in Sri Lanka. Remember this point. Okay? This group, this horizontal lines in blue color. Here also. And this entire northern coast, entire eastern coast, and this part, it's Colombo in the south-western coastal region, a very small stream. This area is inhabited by Sri Lankan Tamils, right? Then coming to the third area, this entire red area, this area in the north, one very small patch in the north, in the central part near Kandy, in the northern part, direction of Kandy, in the southern direction of Kandy, right? And in the southeastern part, two little patches. These are the patches or regions where Indian Tamils reside, right? Now, coming to the fourth area, the Muslims. These are the patches where the Muslims are residing. I hope this much is clear to you. But if you see your NCERT book, you will find about the ethnic composition of Sri Lanka that the Singalas occupy 74% of the total population. Right? I repeat, Singalas 74% of the total population of Sri Lanka. Right? Then Tamils 18% of the total population of Sri Lanka. But remember here one thing, and that is very important also. The Tamils who occupy 18% in the total population of Sri Lanka are of two categories. Number one, Indian Tamils, and they occupy 5%. Then Sri Lankan Tamils, they occupy 13%, 5 plus 13, 18%. Right? The Christian community, that community occupies 7% of the total population of Sri Lanka, as you will be reading in the NCERT book also. Now, coming to the main point, power sharing, right? We see here the Singalas are in majority. But remember, the Singalas have established their majority by an act also. And that act is famous as the Majoritarian Act of 1956. Right? Now, what is majoritarianism? This is very important point to know. Majoritarianism means when a majority community rules the minority community on its will without considering the needs, demands and desires of the minority community is called majoritarianism. Right? Majoritarianism was established in Sri Lanka with a law in 1956, as I told you. And the only objective of that Majoritarian Act of 1956 was to establish the Sinhala supremacy. For that, there were three provisions in the Act. The first provision said that Sinhala would be the state language, right? Sinhala would be the state language. Remember this point. And most of the seats in the government jobs, government schools and government colleges would be reserved for whom? Sinhala applicants. This is the second thing to remember. The third thing which was there in the Majoritarian Act was Buddhism was declared state religion. Most of the Sinhalese, almost all of the Sinhalese are of Buddhist religion, or you can say they follow Buddhism, right? In this way, we see that the Majoritarian Act of Sri Lanka deprived, neglected the Tamil community, especially the Sri Lankan Tamils, right? As a result, a civil war started in Sri Lanka. Then what is a civil war? Remember, when two opposing groups in a country fight against one another for their needs and demands, and that conflicts becomes so intense, so violent that we call it a civil war. In Sri Lanka, the two communities which fought violently after 1956 were the Sri Lankan Tamils and the Sinhalas, and that resulted in what? A civil war. Now, here we have to learn one more thing, and that is very important also. What is that? Due to the three provisions of the Sri Lankan Majoritarian Act, 5 things happened. Number 1, the Sri Lankan Tamils started feeling alienated from the Sri Lankan mainstream. This is number 1. Number 2, the Sri Lankan Tamils realized that their interests, their needs, their demands were neglected by the majoritarian community, that was Sinhala community, and the government in Sri Lanka. This is number 2. Number 3, they realized, they thought, who thought? Sri Lankan Tamils. They realized that the majoritarian government in Sri Lanka had been depriving them gradually from their rights, right? Then the 4th thing, the Sri Lankan Tamils thought their demands, their opportunities, especially in the field of education, in the field of culture, in the field of language, were denied continuously by the majoritarian Sinhala government. And above all, the 5th point is the Sri Lankan Tamils thought that they have been deprived of all their opportunities in all the fields of life, so it resulted in a civil war. So, when Tamils, Sri Lankan Tamils, realized that their demands were denied continuously by the Sinhalese government, by the majoritarian government, they decided to launch movements, they decided to launch organizations. These movements and organizations by the Sri Lankan Tamils demanded 3 things. Their 3 objectives were, their 3 aims were, their 3 proposals were, you can say. Number 1, they wanted Tamil to be recognized as an official language. Number 1, Tamil language to be recognized as an official language. Number 1. Number 2, they wanted that in the region where they are in majority, that region should be given regional autonomy. Means the regions in Sri Lanka where the Sri Lankan Tamils are in majority should be given regional autonomy. Right? Then number 3, their educational and cultural interests should be saved, should be promoted. So these are the 3 demands of the Tamil movements or Tamil organizations. For that purpose, they formed a very, very powerful organization, and that organization became famous as the LTTE, Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam. Eelam means state. right? Tamil Ela means Tamil state, a region with Tamil autonomy, right? So these were the three demands of the LTTE, right? Quite natural, the majoritarian government in Sri Lanka did not listen to these demands. They continuously neglected the Tamil community, especially the Sri Lankan Tamil community. As a result, the civil war started in Sri Lanka, right? And as we have seen in the first example or the first story, the story of Belgium, people got ready to share power. They developed a system. They followed federalism. They followed a democratic, value of power sharing. So they flourished, they developed, they remain united, they become popular all over the world. It means what? Power sharing is always good for democracy. It is the very spirit of democracy, right? But in the second story, the story of Sri Lanka, we have seen the two major communities, the Sinhalas and the Tamils, they fought against one another, and that fight became so intense that it developed as a civil war. Okay? Many civilians, even the military personnel, both sides, the Tamils and the Sinhalese, lost their life. It's a huge loss of life and property. Why? Because both communities didn't agree for power sharing. So, my dear children, with these two stories, we come to know that power sharing is a must for any democracy. The success of democracy depends on the unity of people, and unity of people is reflected always by the power sharing concept. Thank you. Rest of the things in this chapter, power sharing, we will be discussing in the next module. Till then, goodbye, take care, follow the things, and wherever you have any doubt, be ready with that. You can post your doubts.